Okay. Welcome to all of you who are joining us for this session from the 26th annual ERF conference. I remind you it's on SDGs as a framework for MENA's development policy. And our special session here is on trade and global value chain. So I'm very happy to welcome three presenters. What I will do is just present them not now all together, but in order. I will just say at the start that 2 out of the 3 papers are on global value chains applied to Turkey, and the third paper is on export promotion agencies and covers a large number of countries. So the first paper by Mohamed Nasser-Din is on spillovers and labor productivity evidence from Turkey's manufacturing. So Mohamedou, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes. And as I understand, you're at the Osaka University, correct?
Right.
Right. So welcome from Osaka. The floor is yours.
I'm actually right now in Mauritania, Africa.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I went to visit my family and got stuck here because of the COVID, so I cannot return.
Ah, okay. Everyone's stuck somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I will be sharing my screen.
Yeah.
So this study actually investigates 2 main assumptions. The first one is the inter-industry spillover in the labor productivity. It also investigates the impact of the global value chains participation on the labor productivity and takes evidence from Turkey. So the study was mainly motivated by the rapid participation of Turkey recently, and that there is not enough documentation, not enough research that actually study the GVC's integration of Turkey at the sector level. So it also investigates an important assumption, Balassa 1961 hypothesis, which stipulate that there is a significant spillover in productivity across industry, and that this spillover takes place through several channels, including like technological improvement, knowledge spillover, and the use of the inputs intermediates. So basically, this study investigates all these assumptions. So I will move a little bit faster because I do not have enough time to go through all of it. So here are the 3 main assumptions: whether the GVC's participation promotes productivity at the industry level in Turkey, and whether this association are confined within own sector, that is, whether there is a spillover, that is, if an industry participates at the GVC, is there a transmission of this benefit from this industry? And finally, it investigates the input-output linkages and model the cross-industry spillover in productivity. So the literature review includes several papers that are closely related to my research. Counterintuitive et al. 2019 investigate the impact of GVC's participation through the vertical specialization of the backward linkages on productivity using all the world input-output dataset. Comrades 2017 also investigates the impact of both GVC backward linkages and forward linkages on productivity. And this study also builds up on this previous study I wrote on the impact of the GVC's participation on employment generation in Turkey. And finally, Badinger et Eger 2008, who investigates the spillover into total factor productivity across industry using spatial econometric techniques. So this contribution has made contribution. It investigates. This is deemed the first study that investigates empirically Balassa's hypothesis using the world input-output 2016, and it also investigates the impact of GVC's participation through both backward and forward linkages on productivity at the sector level in Turkey. So the main result, we find that there is a significant spillover in productivity across industry at the sector level in Turkey, and that GVC's participation does not affect industries does not affect productivity within own sector, but it also, there is a transmission mechanism through the input-output relations, and there is a spillover effect that goes through. So regarding the data, I used the world input-output 2016's data, and I also used the SEA, the social economics account, to extract the main variables needed. I construct the backward and forward linkages using the Leontief 1936 method. Here are some graphs. It shows that manufacturing backward linkages is the faster, it posts faster compared to the other sectors, and that the DVX, the indirect value added export, is the faster when it comes for the service sectors. Here I go through some illustration that plots the changes of the average forward and backward linkages and productivity. Here there is a scatter plot of the foreign value added and labor productivity, and the indirect value, domestic value added export, and its association with labor productivity. And here, this is the weight matrix I use to capture the interconnectedness between sectors, which I use, which actually I calibrate using special econometric techniques to capture both the direct and indirect effects. So the estimation models relies upon a Cobb-Douglas specification following Counterintuitive et al. 2019. I augment this model using a weighted input-output relation between sectors that weights the dependent variable, which is the productivity. This yields what is known in the econometrics as the spatial autoregressive model. This model captures both the direct and indirect effect of the explanatory variable on the dependent variable. It also captures the relationship between the dependent variable across the units, which is in the industry in such a case. I also estimate a SEM, spatial error model, which investigates whether the spillover is confined within sectors having similar characteristics. This is not the case for the SAR model, which stipulates that there is a global spillover effect. This means that changes in the GVC's changes in one explanatory variable set in motion a wave of adjustments that affect all the other connected industry with feedbacks effects. So the implications are different. This is the reason why I also estimate the SEM model. So to lend support to the use of the interconnectedness between industry, I use what is known as a Moran test. Moran test uses the residuals of the non-spatial models to give evidence to support the inclusion of the interconnectedness between sectors. And as you can see here, there are several significant statistics which suggests that the sectors are connected, and there is a sort of interconnectedness between industry that needs to be accounted for in the model. So here I estimate an OLS model, two-way fixed effect model, the SAR and the SEM model. As you can see here, there is evidence that fixed effect should be accounted for in the OLS model, which we discard for the moment. And I also estimate a two-way fixed effect model, which, as you can see here, the foreign value added is not associated with the productivity, whereas the productivity rises with the domestic value added, which parallels the learning by exporting hypothesis set forth by the DeLocker 2013, which stipulates that firms with export orientation benefit more are more productive and more innovative as compared to fixed without international expansions. So here, one important application of this estimation is that what we see here, the spatial autocorrelation. We call it spatial, but in this context, it's like the input-output weighted relation between sectors, which suggested that there is a significant spill over across industry in the productivity. And this spillover is positive. That is, there is a positive transmission of productivity across industry, which might take a form of like knowledge spillover, technological improvement, and so on. And as you can see here, and according to Elhorst 2012, the goodness of his lends support that the SAR model is the data generating process actually. So here So this makes us consider the SAR model as the data generating process. However, the point estimates here does not direct and indirect effect from the multi-normal distribution of the point estimates.
Jamie, I guess we've lost Mohamedou. Apparently his internet connection has been down or something. You're muted. Just a moment.
No, I was just saying I'm not surprised in Mauritania maybe the connection is not very good.
Right. Would you like to go to the next presentation until Mohamedou is able to go back?
Yeah, why don't I suggest that Pina continues, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hello, Pina.
Hello, Professor. I'm sharing my desktop with all of you. Actually, I couldn't hear, but is everything? Actually, I couldn't hear Professor, but I mean, is everything okay?
Yeah, but
I'm sharing my desktop with all of you. Can we start? Okay.
Yes,
can you hear me?
Okay. Again,
please
hello.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, hello, everyone. My name is Pınar from Gebze Technical University in Turkey. And today we will present our article, the name, The Effects of Openness and Global Value Chains on the Performance of Turkey's Sectors. Here is our outline of the presentation. First, I will mention about our motivation and contribution to the literature, and then I will explain data and methodology we use in our analysis, and then I will provide estimation results, and finally I will conclude our presentation. As you all know, improvements in information, communication, and transportation technologies make global economy highly integrated and also make production process much more fragmented. And in fact, 2/3 of international trade are just composed of intermediate goods and services. And according to the recent World Development Report, there has been a gradual decrease in tariff rates over the past 3 decades. And considering the highly integrated global economy depends two main pillars I mean, one is international trade and the other one is foreign direct investment. We want to assess whether the benefits of participating into this system are higher than the risks involved in it, like in the current COVID-19 crisis. As far as we know, this is the first sectoral study investigating the relationship between a variety of openness measures and also sectoral performance variables for Turkey. And in order to achieve this, we utilize newly released databases, which will be explained in data parts. And thanks to these newly released databases, we are able to reach longer time periods. And also, by utilizing these data sets, we are able to compute forward and backward GBC participation indexes based on final demand, not gross export. And furthermore, we are able to calculate length and distance measure in order to, understand the complexity of exported or imported products, which sectors sell or buy, and also the position of sectors in global value chains. We have 5 main databases: output, capital, labor compensation, and the share of work hour are directly taken from BIOT, and sectoral gross export, domestic content of export, imports, and the sectoral value added measure are coming from OECD Trade in Value Added database. Average tariff rates are taken from WITS, and by utilizing inter-country input-output tables, we are able to compute GBC participation and length and distance measure. And finally, sectoral foreign direct investment flows, capital flows, are taken from a database of Central Bank Republic of Turkey. Since the first release of the databases are not compatible with the second release, we have 2 different time periods. And after matching 5 databases as an operational sample, we have 24 sectors for the first sample, and we have 25 sectors for the second sample. Among them, 1 is agriculture, 1 is construction, 12 are manufacturing, and 11 are service industries. Before moving on to the empirical part, we just want to discuss some statistics related to sectors with graphs. In this graph, the sectoral length and backward GBC participation are discussed for 2 reference years, 1995 and the 2014. The starting point and the end point of our time period, which will be discussed. And at this point, let's define the length measure. Actually, length based on the backward linkages of sectoral trade activities, and measure, counts the average number of production stage, and also shows the complexity of imported products. The columns at the bottom represent external length, foreign part of the length. The columns at the top represent internal length, the domestic part of the length. As you all see, the sectoral lengths of all sectors are very close to 1, which means that the important intermediates or final goods, the combination of them are not complex. They are just simple goods or services and carry little R&D on it. For instance, when we look at these sectors with high backward GBC participation, the colored dots just represent the backward GBC participation for 2 reference years. For instance, the sectors chemicals and also machinery have higher backward GBC participation compared to other sectors. And even when we look at these sectors, we notice that their lengths are very close to 1. But when we look at the domestic part of the length, we see that some sectors such as electricity and also food products, these columns, and textile industries this column, and also the wood industry have relatively higher sectoral length, which means that these sectors mainly depend on complex intermediate inputs in their production process. And having finished the backward linkages, let's move on to the forward linkages. The figure 2 shows the sectoral upstreamness and the forward GVC participation, again for 2 reference years. Let's define what is the meaning of upstreamness. Upstreamness counts how many production stages are passed before reaching final demand. And similar to the length measure, we notice that the upstream, the value of upstream index are close to 1 for nearly all sectors. And even in the sectors with higher forward GVC participation, like chemicals and rubber and also textile, we notice that there is no difference. And actually, we can interpret that the Turkish manufacturing sectors sell their goods, and these goods are utilized as intermediate inputs in production, in order to produce final goods in importer country. I mean, these products, I mean, these goods just cross border only once and probably carry a little R&D on it. But when we look at the domestic parts, we notice that some sectors like electricity, gas and water supply, and also computer and related activities, that is information technology, and also finance, have relatively higher value of upstreamness measure, which means that the goods and services of these sectors are highly utilized in domestic production network. The last figure, our last figure, combines the first figure and the second figure actually. According to the proposition of bank, we try to calculate position index, which actually shows the relative upstreamness and defined as calculated by dividing upstreamness by length measure. I mean, dividing forward linkages by backward linkages, so that we can reach relative upstream value of sectors. Again, similar to the last graph, we noticed that there is no difference in external area, in foreign area. The sectors neither located upstream or downstream part of the global value chain. But when we look at the domestic part, we notice that, as we expect, computer and related activities, electricity, gas and water supply, and also financial intermediation. When we look at the height of the columns, we notice that these sectors are located upstream part of the domestic production network. So we can say that the certain upgrading are necessary in order to be benefited more, in order to gain some productivity gains from international trade by looking at the descriptives for sectors. This brings me to the methodology part. The total factor productivity is not included in our data sets, so we thought that the TFP is like residual, and we use Timmer's methodology in order to calculate total factor productivity growth. And in order to estimate our specification and models, we utilize different GMM methods and fixed effect methods. Total factor productivity and export growth are regressed on lag value of capital per worker, labor productivity, and our openness measures based on both backward and forward linkages. In value-added growth analysis, we just drop labor productivity and include other variables in our model, since labor productivity is already defined as value-added per worker. Our first openness measure based on backward linkages and include import per employee, tariff rates which Turkey imposes, backward participation, and FDI inflows. The second openness measure includes, based on, again, forward linkages, and include export per employees, tariff rates which Turkey pays, forward GVC participation, and FDI outflows. We include all time dummies, time dummies, -1, in our all specifications and models. In a result part, the first 3 tables represent the estimation results for the first sample and for the total sample. When we look at the table, we add all openness measures step by step in order to see their effects on our dependent variables. As you can see, we can see a high persistency in TFP growth, since there is a positive and significant sign of lagged value of TFP. Even though there is no impact on import, as you can see, we notice that there is a positive influence of export and also domestic value added of exports on total factor productivity growth. Which actually proves the learning by exporting hypothesis for Turkey. And other variables, we couldn't see any relationship between other variables such as tariff rates, participation indexes, and the capital flows. Actually, we expect the insignificant coefficient of participation from our interpretation of graphs, since we just integrate a simple part of the GVC, and we couldn't further integrate into global value change. We couldn't observe any total factor productivity growth in our sample. When we look at the value-added growth, the significance coefficients of export and domestic value-added of export continue to exist, and also tariff rates which Turkey pays has negative effect on value-added growth, and also forward participation in this analysis appears to be positive and significant. So that we can say that forward participation enhanced value-added growth. Again, there is no relationship between the capital flows and the value-added growth. And the final measure of the sectoral performance, in the final measure of sectoral performance variables, we noticed that the tariff rates which Turkey pays still has negative influence on the export growth, actually, which also, the transmission mechanism of the value added, decreasing value added. Again, there is no relationship between the capital flows and the export growth. The next 3 tables represent the result for the second sample, the periods of 2005 and 2014. And as you can notice, the sign of lag value of total factor productivity turns to be negative and significant in this time. Actually, other than tariff rates, there is no relationship between our openness measure and our sectoral performance variables. Actually, this is quite expected, since the years, the period includes 2008 global financial crisis, and also the global downturn after it. These global environments just influence the export performance and the output growth of countries, so that we couldn't see any strict and strong relationship between them. The one important thing, I think, is the positive coefficient of tariff rates which Turkey imposes has positive effect on value-added growth, and also positive effect on export growth, which means that Turkish sectors can be benefited from some trade restrictions in short times, and maybe some infant industries are able to enhance themselves in order to gain competitiveness in the international area. This is just, I mean, the summary of what I said now. But the one important thing is the fact that these effects are mainly deriving from the estimates of manufacturing industries. Since we just split this sample into manufacturing and service, we noticed that there is no relationship between variables, I mean openness variables, and the TFB, export and value added growth for service industries, but the strong coefficients are valid for manufacturing sectors, which will be included also in the appendix part of the slides. I mean, this is just the summary of what I said now. I want to focus on the discussion part, which actually combines the interpretation of graphs and also the result of estimates. High backward GVC participation of some sectors, such as chemicals and coke and also machinery, make clear. Yeah, Professor.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm just summarizing.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Make dependence of imported intermediates and GVC more clear, but they should be, I mean, the integration should be more complex and deep, so that they can stimulate total factor productivity and even, I mean, and then create some output growth for sectors. And the given positive effects of forward integration and losing its significance in short times make clear that the more coordination among countries and sectors are necessary in order to not miss the opportunity of opportunity and benefits of participating into GVC. This is also very important for some sectors, some crucial sectors with high forward participation, like textile, chemicals, and machinery. And also, given the high internal upstream of value of information technology, Turkish sectors, I mean the Turkish government and policymakers should invest in more information and communication technology in order to enhance and in order to get rid of the negative effects of the transmission. And thank you for listening to me. This is a little bit hairy. And if you have any question, I will be happy to answer them. These are the, I mean, appendix parts includes descriptive statistic and the result of manufacturing for those who are interested, by the way. And
yeah, thank you.
I couldn't hear properly.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I couldn't hear properly, but
thank you. May I ask Mohamedou, who's back, to Mohamedou, could you finish your presentation now? Can you finish your presentation? I'm a little. Mohamedou?
Yes, I'm right away.
Okay. Can you have so do we have enough time? I give you 5 minutes to to finish, then
All right, I will go through it rapidly. This way,
yeah, okay,
great.
go ahead.
Thank you so much. I will go through it rapidly. Just skip the irrelevant parts and go straight to the conclusion.
Yeah, you had presented your results of the two models, and you were discussing those results. So we're listening to the end. Thank you.
Right. So here, as I said, that I stimulated the Monte Carlo simulations. I generated both the direct and indirect effect of the foreign value added, the backward linkages and the forward linkages. And I found that there is a negative association between the backward linkages, which stipulates that the import of intermediate used in the Turkish exports act as actually a substitute of the locally produced good, which leads to less value added, and therefore, as we define the labor productivity as the value added per employee, it leads to less productivity. So forward linkages, as I explained before, contribute, boosts productivity both within and across industry. That is, if a stochastic shock in one sector's benefits that sector from the forward linkages, there is a sort of transmission of this positive association toward other sectors connected through the input-output linkages. So, and according to Gnikta, Rai, and Marchiva 2019, it is very hard to assess the gain associated with the GVCs across industries because of the heterogeneity of these sectors, and therefore it might be more legitimate. It might be more interesting to segregate the sectors with respect to their category. That is, manufacturing and services have different applications because both the distribution of the value added according to Baldwin 2012, according to production technologies heterogeneity according to Banga 2018, and according to labor skills distribution as well. And therefore, here I separate the sample in two main subsample, manufacturing and services, and construct a sub-weight matrices for each category and investigate the participation of these sectors' impact on productivity. And I found that manufacturing backward linkages have a negative association with the productivity both within and across industries, and that the domestic value added or the indirect domestic value added export, the forward linkages according to Hummel CR 2001 definition, actually leads to less productivity as well. This is not the case in the service sectors, where I find that forward linkages boosts productivity both within and across industry, lending support to the hypothesis of learning by exporting. And one striking or interesting finding here, that there is a significant productivity spillover, as can be seen here in this row, in this input-output relation connection, inter-sectors connection. There is a significant positive productivity spillover across industry. That is, one stochastic shock that affects one sectors propagates, transcends, or transmits across industry and benefit all the other sectors with feedback effects, according to Lisage 2014's empirical hypothesis. And this is more pronounced in manufacturing with a larger magnitude, as can be seen here, lending support, suggesting that there is a positive spillover effect, and it is more pronounced for manufacturing as compared with respect to services. So basically, this article here set for two main hypotheses. It investigates empirically Balassa 1961 hypothesis, which stipulate that there is a significant spillover in productivity across industry. That spillover transmission might take several forms, like technological improvement transmission, knowledge spillover, input-output use. From this perspective, I investigate the input-output relations and the technology embedded within it. It also sheds some light on the GVC's participation through both backward and forward linkages and its impact on the productivity across industry and within industry intersector level. The findings are as follows. I found a positive spillover effect in productivity, which lends support to the hypothesis set forth by Ballas in 1961. And also find that manufacturing, actually the GVC's participation in manufacturing leads to less productivity, which suggests the substitute nature of the imported intermediates or the inputs used in the Turkish export and into manufacturing level. I find that forward linkages boosts or improves productivity both within and across industry, lending support to the learning by exporting hypothesis set forth by the Locker 2013. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, both of you. Is everyone with me? I'm now speaking.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Before, do you mind, Riyad? I would like just to comment on these two papers because they are together, and then we'll discuss your paper.
Sure.
I found both papers very interesting. Having myself worked recently on GVCs in Africa, my interest in this came from the fact that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is trying to develop what is called regional value chains. So what we did is we went and used the same databases that you are using, the World Input-Output Database that goes from 1990 to 2016, and did a lot of work comparing forward and backward linkages and the total, let's say the total participation in intermediate trade. So I have a couple of comments on each paper. I both found them very interesting, but I would have liked to have seen on the descriptive side a little bit more use of the graphs that were presented in the 2020 WDR. If you look at the World Development Report of 2020, they do a lot of things that you have the same databases. You can look at 1990 or 1995 and 2015. So part of the interest in doing that is that you can see for each of the industries what is happening, okay? And I think that's important. The second part is Turkey. For Turkey, you also have the data from the TIVA database and from the WIOD database. And I would be interested to see for those, what are the difference between the calculations you get from each database. Because the WIOD database, we know that Tim has done the best he could, but when you look at some of those numbers, they're absolutely crazy. Some of these are when you look at some countries, it's just, it's not very credible. So my question is, it's not a question, it's rather, you would want to look at the comparison, especially for PNAR. PNAR, you can look, I don't know if you've done it, but that's one thing that I would do. Now, coming to the papers themselves, I think you have provocative thesis. The one I start with Mohamedou's presentation. I'm not an expert, and I have not used spatial econometrics very often, but I tried to once or twice, and the little bit I learned from it is the way you choose the weights in the matrix when you're running the regression usually has a lot of can have quite an impact on the results. I mean, this is something I wouldn't say arbitrary, but it's something that can have strong results on your strong impact on your results. So my question to you is, when you do your Monte Carlo study, are you testing for that? Go ahead. Sorry.
Mohammed, yes, okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead, yeah. I can hear.
How about now?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, as I said, ELHORST 2014 conducted several Monte Carlo simulation using several spatial weight matrices in a geographical aspect. So the implication he finds that the choice of the weight matrix has, in fact, the choice of the weight masses might actually impact the estimate if a random, like ad hoc weight matrix is chosen to calibrate the model. However, if the weight matrix is well designed and actually fits within the economic concepts which I use in this context, it is meant to capture the input-output relation. So I use the average purchase or the average uses of the input between the industries. That is, I argue that if a stochastic shock in productivity in one sector leads to more productivity in that sector, and the other industries relies on that sector to import intermediate, it is likely that those industry also benefit from this stochastic positive shock in the productivity. So it depends on the theoretical framework, the empirical and econometric theory setting, and how it is well designed. So according to ELHORST, if the weight matrices all capture the main nature of the interdependence, the impact of the misestimate of the biases here, we are talking about efficiencies biases. That is the efficiency that lands in the error terms, leading to like problem in the significance establishments. So the biases are reduced or sometimes are not existent at all if the weight masses are well designed. In this case, in my study, I emphasize that the weight matrix is well calibrated, is well designed to capture the interdependencies.
Let me just ask you one last question before I go to Pinar. Is your you have a very counterintuitive result. The counterintuitive result is that you would think the backward integration is really important. Why? Because what you hear in global value chains all the time is that what you need in order to be successful, you need to import to export. So if you don't import, you don't export. And basically, if you look at the WDR and these correlations, by the way, these correlations are within and they're between and not within. So there are all kinds of problems with it. But anyway, a strong, rather robust result is that I would have expected that your productivity, your productivity measure would have been positively correlated. And the second, I'll send you my comments on that. And the second one, you know, and the second one is that if you look at protection and productivity, if you look at that, I'm sorry, if you look at productivity and protection, you know, the fact that you have a higher rate of protection, then you're going to get a higher productivity, right? Just because you measure your value added in domestic prices. It's all Balassa stuff, you know. If you measure GDP, if you measure value added at world prices, as opposed to value added at domestic prices, we all do that. So you have a correlation. Right. So I come to now to Pinar's presentation. I like very much a great effort, having worked a little bit on this, but certainly not as much as you. You've gone very, very far on this. And one thing that we did not do, I like very much, you tried to look at the length of the value chain. You know, the length of it. One of the arguments in regional value chains and global value chains is that if your trade costs fall, you're going to have both the length that may increase over time, but also you're going to go back and forth across countries more often. And this is something that you're trying to measure, which I think is important. Now, as to your, I should say, I did my thesis with Balassa. So when you get your results, it says everything about my age. But anyway, when I see a result that the protection, that you have higher value-added growth in the sectors with protection, I think this is something that needs to be. I'm not saying it isn't correct, but I think you would need to have much. You need to pursue your paper and to try and really just not just say, okay, that's what we find and we have a policy recommendation from that. I'm not saying it's that you should eventually get to that, but I don't think that you really have the you really don't have the enough evidence. And I have some comments with links to our paper, which are, by the way, is not very good either. We're comparing this across countries, so yours is in some ways more interesting. So I enjoyed it very much, but I think you should you have a little bit of work that justify this, and especially all these openness variables that you're including. I think you need to look at the correlation matrix of all these variables to see what you're capturing. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you.
I will send you the comments, but I want to let Riyad now speak about a very important topic, especially I would say in Africa, where we tried in other work to try and look at what was the effect of I forget we call those the
export credit agencies, no?
Yeah, not the export promo. You call it export credit. We call it export promotion.
Promotion.
Marcelo Larreaga, who's at the University of Geneva, did a couple of papers on export promotion agencies, trying to get some data. And you have much better data and good econometric techniques. So I'm looking forward to listening to your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So it's a chapter which is slightly different from the two presentations before. So my name is Riyad Ben Jalili. I am the Director of Research and Country Risk Assessment at the Arab Investment and Credit Export Agencies located in Kuwait. So I will share my screen. Okay. I start with the motivation. So to understand why is it important and why does it matter regarding the official export insurance in the Arab countries specifically. So promoting and selling goods into foreign markets are processes that are always likely to be associated with facing numerous risks. These emanate from the likes of country political situation, the status of the banking systems, the commercial counterparty state of affairs, and the foreign currency positions. So risks can arise from voluntary default actions or private or also government buyers, or else from involuntary default actions by buyers caused by their country's unexpected economic, financial, and political circumstances. And risk mitigation techniques designate credit enhancement instruments used by exporters to transfer certain defined risks to creditworthy third parties. Generally, we design by the guarantors or insurers who are better placed to mitigate them. These instruments should be even more useful for firms operating in developing countries as they would not be sufficiently creditworthy. So effective risk mitigation in international trade often relates to trade and export finance banks or other providers working in partnership with the Export Credit Agency or ECAs, international financial institutions, or private risk insurers. and to deliver the right levels of mitigation for particular markets and trading relationship or individual counterparties. And the supports by ECAs and public financial institutions of a global trade is playing, as you know, an increasingly crucial role for exporters and for investors also. And for instance, in 2018, new businesses underwritten by members of the Bern Union, an international organization symbolizing the credit and investment insurance industry, including both public and private institutions, totalized 2.43 trillion in export credits. It is the equivalent of 12.5% of the total world cross-border trade. So ECAs are operating for account of the state, and their objective function is likely to be embedded in the more general policy goals of the domestic government. This is from the part of the motivation. So what is now the question? In the literature, it has been common to use credit risk scores to investigate impacts of external sources of risk, and especially political risk and political institutions on foreign investment location choice decision maker. However, only few studies have specifically examined the relationship between importing countries' credit risk scores and exports. Thanks to the availability of adequate data on official export credit guarantee programs, the existing research in this field has been mainly focused on evaluating the effectiveness of these programs, particularly in the European countries. Nonetheless, export credit support in several Arab countries is still a relatively new practice, and its effectiveness remains practically untested. Out of the 22 Arab League members, only 11 have an ECA, or export credit agency, export-import banks, or similar programs. So the data published from the Arab ECAs on respective business volumes shows the relative size of the programs, as well as their contributions to national exports. Only 10 entities published this data, though out of date for the most part. As for the 8 Arab ECAs that have published data, an average ratios of business volumes to merchandise exports during the period 2008-2018 ranged from 0.2% in Saudi Arabia to 6% in Lebanon, which are very low by international standards. In 2018, the 8 Arab ECAs arranged for approximately 2.42 billion in export financing supports, representing just under 0.1% of worldwide export insurance activity as reported by Bern Union. And moreover, total export credit operations in the Arab ECAs have seen little change from 2.3 billion in 2008 to 2.4 billion in 2018. So it's approximately the same amount. What is the strategy to test the importance of the ECAs in the Arab region? Accordingly, the deficiency in terms of detailed statistics on the activities of the ECAs in the Arab world inhibits the adoption of a direct empirical strategy to test whether public export credit guarantees lead to a significant amount of additional exports. So Arab ECAs are indeed very reticent about revealing information about their financial operations, including past and current project data, figures on guarantee issued, amount recovered, and outstanding claims, all of which are only reported on aggregated levels and only for few countries. So the paper contends that in the absence of insurance contracts against risk of defaulting payments, exporting firms are more likely to export to countries with higher creditworthiness or higher prior prospects of making payments. So this is the main hypothesis. The main assertion is tested empirically using merchandise export values for unbalanced panel of 107 Arab partner or importer countries between 1997 and 2017, totalizing an average 85% of the Arab merchandise exports. So I consider level log model specification as follows. So it is indicated in equation 17, where the subtract I stands for the receiving or importing country, and the dependent variable corresponds to the natural logarithm of real exports value per capita at importing country I from the Arab region. So in consequences, data are normalized across importing countries, and you have the set of regressors, which include the natural logarithm of the combination of short and long-term economic risks, the natural logarithm of the real inward FDI stock per capita, and also the share of manufacturing imports in overall imports in country I. All variables are converted in real time by using the appropriate GDP deflator by country. And the sign of the coefficient, the most important coefficient, for example, for the beta coefficient, would depend on whether there is substitutability or complementarity between imports and FDI in relevant partner countries. And the log structure is in the adopted specification is intended to capture the relatively longer time period that may be required for the impact of FDI on trade to be felt. And the country's share of manufacturing imports in overall imports to be used as a proxy for its relative factor endowment. So gamma is expected to be negative as the Arab region has relatively low levels of intra-industry trade. It means that exports are ceteris paribus directed to countries with a dissimilar factor endowment. The results. So the starting point in the empirical analysis is to use a standard static model as a benchmark and estimate the static regression model given by equation 17. However, economic theory, as you know, as well as a large number of empirical work corroborate the hypothesis that trade is a dynamic process and that estimating static equations may generate upward biased estimates. So the next step is to explicitly introduce dynamics in the specification. And the dynamic specification given by equation 18 is estimated by applying system GMM estimator. The results confirm that the data generating process is indeed dynamic. The coefficient of the lag dependent variable, as you see, is positive and significant. The magnitude of the persistence effect is in line with the empirical literature. And the Arellano band tests of autoregressive of first and second order confirm the consistency of the system GMM estimator. And also the Sargon test of the over-identifying restrictions indicates that the hypothesis that all moment restrictions are satisfied is not rejected. So the dynamic specification reveals that the long run effect of creditworthiness on export is given by an elasticity of 0.83, slightly lower than the static specification. So accordingly, a 10% increase in the credit score of an importing country is expected to lead to 8.3% increase in Arab exports of goods to that country. And if the long-term effect is captured appropriately by the dynamic specification, then the estimation results would suggest a direct and a significant positive relationship between creditworthiness and exports coming from Arab countries. The magnitude of the relationship, especially in the long run, leaves little doubt about the importance of the repayment risk as a key determinant of good exports in the Arab region. So in this case, factors such as guarantees, reduced loading, subsidized, and a lower default probability are all factors that contribute significantly to the creditworthiness of any given importing country, hence leading to higher exports, so higher performance in terms of exports. The robustness of the results for non-high income countries is checked. So the principal argument for excluding high income countries is the fact that short run and long run economic risks tend to be potentially more substantial in non-industrial countries. It is therefore appealing to verify and authenticate the impact of the credit score of this category of importing countries. So separate regressions for each export product group defined according to the Standard International Trade Classification Revision 3 are conducted. In addition to initial total merchandise product groups, 3 broad categories have been introduced. So separate groups for primary commodities, manufactured goods, and machinery and transport equipment. And the results summarized in table 4 show that the coefficient for credit score is significant and substantially large across the product groups. And based on this result, a 1% increase in the credit score of any importing non-high income countries lead to an unexpected increase of 1.14% in the value of Arab primary commodity exports to that country, and likewise an expected 1.88% in the value of Arab machinery and transport equipment exports. So I come to the conclusion and some policy recommendation. So in this paper, evidence in support of an economically significant effect of creditworthiness on exports is highlighted. In addition, the results confirm that the estimates with regard to the impact of credit scores hang crucially on the future of the sample of countries and the export product groups also. In fact, based on a sample of non-high income countries alone, the creditworthiness has been found to be effective over the entire period under consideration. The long-run estimated elasticities exceeded significantly the values derived from the whole sample. In other words, the empirical results provide a clear and compelling justification of the usefulness of specialized export financial institutions to finance exports and mitigate also credit risk, particularly in Arab non-oil exporting countries. Establishing or developing an already present public ECA could help relieve export constraints by facilitating access to credit for exporters through mitigating risk and increasing banks' willingness to lend. This can also be supported by helping exporters to offer better payment terms to importers, in addition to backing all efforts to enhance confidence in both relevant Arab banks and enterprises. Most Arab countries are in need to set up ECAs or to take steps toward boosting the effectiveness of existing ones, to finance export and alleviate also market failures and market imperfections. A specialized export finance institution requires, in the first place, comprehensive understandings and analysis of the current conditions and trends within the financial sector of the country in question. And the substance of this should be detecting any market failures and imperfections that may adversely affect the volume of exports. For that purpose, the depth of the financial system and actual lending practices should be carefully assessed. And despite reform efforts, there are still various financial sector constraints in many countries in the Arab region that hamper the competitiveness of exporters and hold back the expansion and upgrading of exports. So these include several financial market regulations and institutions' shortcomings that cause difficulties for transactions between foreign and local entities in many Arab countries. So the Arab region is also characterized by severe shortages in the supply of trade finance products. Referring to banks surveyed for a trade finance study by the Asian Development Bank, the study estimates the global trade finance gap at 1.5 trillion, 14% of which originate in the Middle East and Africa. And about 3/4 of all rejected trade finance transactions come from the small and medium enterprises and mid-cap firms. So while there are no separate estimates for Arab countries in this regard, and given the region's comparatively low levels in terms of both financial sector depth and access, it seems reasonable to expect that trading companies there face a significant trade finance gap, which give more impact of the development of this type of institution, export credit agency in the Arab world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for an excellent presentation, and also I would say a very compelling and convincing study. I would say not only because there's now a growing literature trying to look at market imperfections and externalities through the export promotion agency literature, which is not very convincing, I would say, compared to the approach that you have here, because you have much better, I would say, better data than the one that is geared towards export promotion agencies. So let me just give you 2 or 3 comments. First, I will forward them to you. First, I found that your econometric analysis is carefully executed. And first, you do show, or you're quite convincing in showing that you've handled reverse causality. So also the results from the static and the dynamic models are contrasted and give plausible estimates. So I think that is also rather convincing. The second, which I found quite useful, is your robustness test, where you find larger elasticities for low-income countries and larger values for manufacturing goods than for primary commodities, if only because manufactured products are differentiated goods which require more search information than homogeneous products. So all this gives a set of plausible and convincing results. So let me now just ask you a couple of questions. First of all, is you mentioned Africa and the Middle East as being those countries that have the greatest problems, and where market imperfections may be stronger than elsewhere. So my question here is, what type of elasticities and what type of results would you get with other low-income countries? And if you split your sample, not just from, I know what you're doing is Arab countries to Arab countries, but I would be interested to see the same type of analysis for which you could have as well for the exports of, let's say, countries in low income or middle income countries, mostly low, in Africa to the rest of the world, just to see what type of results you would get here. The second one is your indices, your short-term and your long-term risk indices are highly correlated. So there's nothing wrong with that, but I would be, or we would be, I think any reader would be interested to know which one of these indices may be the most important or has the highest explanatory power. And I think that might deserve a little bit more analysis just for the reader to take a look at. And also, if you look at the distribution of these index values over time, I'm sure that they don't change very much. But are they very different across different income groups and across different periods? In other words, are you getting different results if you split your sample? Let's say instead of having your time series, you have 107 countries for 20 years. What about if you, I'm not sure you did that, if you just check your specification where you would take averages over every 3 years or 5 years just to give time for equilibrium to take place rather than doing it every year. So just to conclude, I find this a very interesting paper, and I think a convincing paper that there's a role not only for export credit agencies, but also I hope it's lending support for export promotion agencies, especially for low-income countries. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I guess we're looking for comments, general comments. Hello? Hello? Bo? Is everyone here still?
Yes,
Sorry.
I can hear you.
Okay. So thank you very much. I don't have any, those are just general comments. I'm going to send you my comments. So if you want to answer, go ahead, or I'll just take questions. Either way, it's fine with, either way is fine with me.
Exactly. So I think that, of course, the first remark regarding the particularity of the Arab region compared to other less developed countries, and I think that, of course, I'm more focused on the situation in the Arab countries, given my responsibility in
Yes.
my situation. But it's of course it's a very important question, because I have to know what is specific to the Arab region. Is it particularly, is it particular, this types of elasticity, this type of sensitivity, is it particular to other Arab countries or not? Because we have certain specificity in the region, especially the dominance of natural resources in terms of exporting process. So it is very important. The second question regarding the indicator. So the indicator generally for measuring the credit worth, the score, or establishing a score of credit worthiness, is based on the lag or the process of exporting. This process is generally short-term process to medium-term. We don't have really long-term. So we have a situation which starts with a few weeks, sometimes 1 or 2 months, to in generally one year and a half, and not more than that. Okay, in 2 years we are speaking about long-term the export process or financing process. So the indicators taken into account, or the score take into account a lot of indicators, not only one. Okay, so many situations regarding the situation of risk associated to the economic environment, associated to the macroeconomic stability, associated to a certain type of risk, and fundamentally the transfer risk, etc. So linked to the balance of payment. Of course, we don't have only one method to calculate these scores. And we have also different other scores. For example, OECD scores regarding the situation of countries, scaling from 0 to 7, okay? And in this case, we have less variation. So I take an indicator which is developed by Fitch company, okay, which take into account more than 50 sub-indicators, and give us more variability from time to time, so from period to period, which is necessary if we have this type of analysis, econometric analysis. If we have, because it is very sensitive to this, to the situation, or to the process generating data. The last question or last remark, of course, I'm not giving you a response, but probably a way how to handle it. And the last one, I think that it's very important remark. Why? Because in this case, you are asking me 2 things. First of all, you are asking me to take into account the diversity or the heterogeneity between exporting Arab countries. So I mean, in this case, I introduce another dimension. So to treat the data, or to treat the analysis in terms of gravity model in this case, and not in terms of panel data. So in this case, I introduce more heterogeneity in terms between, for example, the 18th or considered Arab countries, or 22 Arab countries exporting Arab countries. And by introducing this heterogeneity, okay, I have the possibility to have much more data in order to see what happened each 3 years. So to take the average of 3 years of each 3 years, and to say the impact of this regularity, okay, giving time to adjust on the impact of evaluating elasticity. So I totally agree with you, and I can say that I start investigating this question by estimating the gravity model and introducing more heterogeneity to see if these elasticities are sensitive to this a new perception of a specification or a new specification of the exporting exporting equations. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, all of you. So is anyone who would like questions and questions from the other participants? I see there are 13 people altogether, so there must be 7 or 8 people in the, I would say in the room, wherever you are. And I'm looking for any questions or chat, anything. Anyone would like to ask a question? Anyone? Well, we have another. Would any of you like to? I cut off Mohamedou and Pina a little bit because I wanted to make sure we had time to speak. Would you like to add anything on global value chains? By the way, I suppose you both read carefully the. I suppose you both read carefully the WDR 2020, right? Yeah. Okay. When I worked on it too, I read it, and I think that for the both papers, it would be interesting for you to use some of the, I wouldn't call them techniques, but some of the way they present the data, because I have worked on it too, but reading your papers, I found it, if I were a referee, I mean, or an editor, which I was a few years, 10 years ago or so, I would say you have to make you still need to make an effort at presenting the stylized facts in the data. I mean, you have relatively good data for Turkey, so that there's really something that both of you can do there, which I don't think you have completely exploited. So I'm looking forward actually to see what you can do, what more you can extract, because you have better data. You really do have better data than what we did when we worked with data on across African countries. Okay, so I'll have the comments sent to you, and for Riyadh, my question, if it was a question, is when I do gravity models and GEPPML like everyone else, you know, one of the things we're always using are the doing business data. And as you know, in the doing business data, each indicator is the average of 30 indicators to go from 0 to 30. So in the end, you don't know you're not quite sure what you're capturing. I mean, that's the problem, because they're so highly correlated. So I'm not saying to do principal component analysis or anything like that, but it creates a problem to identify where really is the problem. Can you get it from, I think by doing what you're going to do, having more heterogeneity, you're going to be able to see some of the differences across countries, across destinations. And I think that will help you identify. But, yeah.
Or we can also use other sources. For example, I'm used to use the PRS group source of data, so which generate not only hard data, but also perception data regarding the risk, evaluating the risk from political risk and economic risk. So it is something which could be correlated with the situation, the economic situation, but not completely correlated with that. So not completely correlated. So the correlation is not very high. And to have some sort of predictions in the situation, regarding the situation, so to be outside, out from the same period in terms of evaluation of the economic impact. So in this case, it could help. It could help. So of course, it's a matter of robustness tests and to see what will be the more adapted proxies or indicator in this sense. To have a better perception of the creditworthiness. But At the same time, it's very important at the same time to work with the direct performance of the ECAs on exports, okay? And we need really, and especially in the Arab countries, to enhance these aspects of data, to develop this aspect of data. In my institution, we have data, we have disaggregated data, okay, that I can use it, but it is not representative about what happened really in the Arab world. So we don't have enough capital, we are not covering we are covering all countries, but not as we wish. So in this case, it's not really representative. But you can work on Euler Hermes data, for example. But it's hard really to have these data, this microeconomic data. With also Atraduce, they have a good database, and also COFAS. Three of these ECAs, it's not the ECAs, but it's a private ECAs, more private ECAs, which control more than 80% of the trade finance business. So in this case, it is a solution probably to use this type of data to have a direct performance analysis in terms of a real impact of the intervention of these private ECAs on the export performance, and to see what happened. But at the same time, it's better to have it on the Arab countries, but not a private outside the Arab countries and part of the OECD countries.
Okay. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and I wish you a happy and a good evening wherever you are. And thank you very much for joining us. And I look forward to continuation. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.